Hey, welcome back. Well, we are joined here by Elsbeth Fast, a licensed sleep therapist from True Sleep Therapy in Fayetteville. You have all the helpful tips for us this morning. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, and we were talking with her at 7:30, so we want to sort of continue that discussion. But for those who maybe weren't here for that, let's talk about hopping back into the routine, like how important it is to start now and what we need to do.
Absolutely. So most kids have been, going to bed much later, sleeping in much later on the weekends, and in advance of school starting, if possible, switching your wake time in very incremental small ways. I recommend 15 minutes earlier every morning. We do have control over what time we wake up. We have less control over what time we fall asleep. But doing that over the course of the upcoming week is a really nice way to prepare your kids for that early morning wake up when school starts, so it's not as jarring.
Yeah, 15 minutes, that's totally doable. I think we can handle that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's going to be hard when you think about you're 45 minutes at some point, an hour, but that's why it's good to have those steps. So if a child has been staying up late, with that, they might eat some snacks or they're eating dinner later. So is there any foods or anything like that that kind of keeps a child awake longer at night that we need to avoid?
Yeah, well, sugar, absolutely. And any caffeine that might be hidden in foods. There are some granola bars that have caffeine in them, or energy bars. The half-life of caffeine is quite long. So even things like dark chocolate can contain enough caffeine to interfere with your sleep. And I don't recommend eating a large meal right before bed. The body's sort of good at doing one thing at a time. And if it has to choose between digesting a large meal versus sleeping, it's going to focus on digesting, that meal. And especially for adults, more so than children, but you don't want to eat a lot of spicy food before bed because acid reflux is one of the really common things that interrupt sleep.
Absolutely. Just heard all the things I eat before bed.
All right, well, we got more. So is maybe waking up at the same time every day, going to bed at the same, how important is that to the sleep schedule?
That is an excellent question. So waking up, anchoring your wake time every morning is critical for children, adolescents, and adults to do year round. If I've had, clients in treatment, and sometimes that's the one thing they do is anchor their wake time, and it dramatically improves their sleep. Because we have a homeostatic drive called our sleep drive, and we need to be hungry for sleep in order to sleep at night. If enough time hasn't elapsed from the time you've woken up in the morning until bedtime, you're not going to be hungry for sleep. We can't make ourselves fall asleep on command, but we can make it more likely to fall asleep when we want to fall asleep if we're hungry for sleep by anchoring our wake time.
Yeah, understood.
And as a sleep therapist, in the last few years, have you seen more kids needing these services coming in, or has it kind of stayed consistent?
That's another excellent question. I have seen an uptick in children with insomnia disorder as young as 9 years old. And that's really shocking. We didn't used to see that in kids, but I think the combination of screen time, being sort of overscheduled after school where you don't have that natural sort of wind down time, just like when we were babies and we would have wind down time before bed, or sort of a ritual. If you're doing activities right up until bed and then expected to hop in bed and fall asleep, it's quite hard to do that.
Wow. And so, even for us here, is catching up on sleep, that phrase, catching up on sleep, is it real? Like, can you catch up on sleep, and is it beneficial?
Another great question. To some degree, you can catch up on sleep. Say on the weekends, you sleep in a little bit later or maybe take a nap. But the danger with that is you could develop sort of what we call social jet lag, where someone wakes up, say at 6 a.m. Monday through Friday, and then sleeps in on the weekend. And again, they're not going to be hungry enough for sleep on Sunday night, and they're essentially pushing their circadian rhythm back for several days and playing catch up all week. The better solution in the long run is to avoid sort of that short-term catching up by anchoring your wake time. That being said, well-timed naps less than 30 minutes before 3 p.m. can be really refreshing. You're going to wake up from non-REM 2 sleep, where you're going to feel like alert and refreshed, as opposed to a longer nap later in the day that's going to interfere with your sleep drive.
I knew it. I knew when I napped longer, I didn't feel as good, but a quick nap, you're okay.
Everything's making sense. I've been doing everything wrong. And I want to go back to the screens. How long before bedtime do people need to get off of their phones?
A minimum of an hour, but the longer that you can do that, the better. But certainly for children, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends an hour before bed, shutting off all electronics, keeping phones outside of the bedroom, going back to an old school alarm clock instead of using your phone as an alarm. It's just so tempting, and we're learning more about the reward center of our brain, and the dopamine hit that we get from scrolling through social media. And for kids and teenagers and adults, we're all susceptible to that. So electronics, powering them down and making them not readily available is a key thing.
Absolutely. So are there any big sleep myths that you'd love to correct? Well, we got you here.
Yeah. Oh, I have so many sleep myths. One is that I have so many people say, well, I'm trying to sleep. I'm laying in bed and I'm trying to sleep. But laying in bed trying to sleep is sort of like trying to digest your food. Sleep is something that happens. It's not something that you can make happen. And if you lay in bed trying to sleep, you're going to develop what we call conditioned arousal to the bed, where the bed becomes a cue for wakefulness and stress. It's better to focus on relaxation at night and remind yourself, I can set the stage for good sleep, but ultimately my body's going to decide when it falls asleep and how much sleep I get. The other thing I would mention is, the wearable devices like smartwatches or Oura rings, that it's really interesting technology, but it's flawed in some ways. And it's creating an epidemic of what we call orthosomnia, where people who wouldn't normally be predisposed to insomnia are developing a lot of anxiety about their sleep based on the data from those devices. So they might wake up feeling okay and then see their data and think, oh, today's going to be terrible. But sleep is very suggestive and very subjective. So if you believe you got a good night's sleep, you're likely to perform well. If you believe you got a poor night's sleep, you're likely to perform poorly. That can be problematic. And the other real myth is that spending more time in bed is not always the answer. You want to limit your time in bed for the amount of time that you're sleeping. Then you're less likely to have a lot of middle of the nighttime awakenings and a shorter latency to sleep where you're able to fall asleep faster. So waiting to get in bed when you're really sleepy as opposed to just tired is a key component.
Okay.
Good advice.
You can use it all.
I do that with my ring now that I think about it.
Uh-oh.
I'm like, I feel great. And then I look at it, it's like 55 for your sleep level. I'm like, nope, I'm going to be tired.
Thank you so much for joining us here today and sharing all these great tips with us. I think we got a good start.
We did.
Right?
We needed to take some notes,
And
for sure.
Make sure, you help your kiddos out there when they're heading back to school. They're going to need it. Definitely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, Danny, do you have a new plan to get your sleep on schedule?
I think the biggest thing for me is just consistency, is consistently getting to bed at the same time, because kind of, breaking that up a little bit, especially on the weekends. You want to stay up, but no, you got to try to keep it as consistent as possible.
Yeah.
So, great advice for everyone, including students, of course, getting back to school.